To Smart Justice Town Hall this week on Wednesday during Decarcerate during COVID. I want to thank all of you for coming on and listening, for sharing this, and for asking people to join. I just want to add that for those who are sharing this as a watch party, if you have anyone that does ask questions in your watch party, if you can submit them either to Molly or to the ACLU Facebook page live. But I encourage everybody to please join our conversation and ask questions as much as you want. So for those who don't know me, I am Melissa Ludin, the regional organizer of our Smart Justice campaign. I'm also joined by a leader of mine, Lance, in my community. And today we're really going to be discussing what is the Smart Justice campaign and what are the goals. With all the things that have been going on recently, within our state, around the country, when we talk about decarcerating during COVID, for police brutality and police accountability, it's important to us to make sure that we are not forgetting about why we are here and what we're doing to fight for those that are incarcerated, especially with the discussion and issue around crimeless revocation, which is one of our goals of our campaign and ending. A little bit about me as far as my experience when we talk about the criminal legal system is I'm somebody that has 19 years experience of the criminal legal system, 5 years of being incarcerated in the correctional system here in our state, and over 15 years of being on supervision. And during that time, in my experience, I have seen many things, and another reason why I am here, and I work alongside an amazing team. To get us started, I want to give an overview of what is the Smart Justice campaign. When we take a look at it, it is a nationwide campaign. We work alongside many different individuals nationally, and in this, it's really looking at we need a new justice system, and what does that look like when we say we need a new justice system, and one that is a lot smaller than what we have, emphasizing that we need to keep our community safe, advancing racial justice because systemic racism is alive in our criminal legal system. And when we talk about how are we spending our resources and money, you know, we spend way too much money incarcerating people, and we'll talk more about that going forward. One of the other things I want to highlight here as we move the goals of our campaign, and the main one being reducing Wisconsin prison population by 50%, reducing racial disparities in the criminal justice system, ending crimeless revocation, expanding the earned release program, and expanding the pardon criteria. And also, we do not want any new prisons because we don't need them here. Why do we need to end this process? Imprisonment is a brutal and costly response to crime that traumatizes incarcerated people and hurts their families and communities. It should be the last option and not the first. The US alone incarcerates more people in both absolute and per capita than any other nation in the world, and Wisconsin incarcerates a greater share of our American men, women, and Native Americans than any other state in this country. And there's something certainly to be said for that. When we talk about reform, you've heard many times reform in our state. I just want to share some numbers with you in our state as far as the prison systems and what they were designed for. The prison were designed to house 17,000 people. And currently our prisons are overcrowded at 23,000, and we have 68,000 people on some type of community supervision, whether that be extended supervision, probation, or parole. We in Wisconsin also incarcerate more Black men, which is 13%, nearly doubles the country's rate. Wisconsin also has the highest incarceration rate for Native Americans, and 1 in 8 Black men of working age in Milwaukee has served some time in prison. And I would also like to highlight, we incarcerate many Black and brown women with the small number that we have of women incarcerated at a high rate as well. Before I begin, when we talk about probation and the first thing that we've taken on with our campaign, many of you may be familiar with when we talk about crimeless revocation. In conversations I have in meeting new people, I continuously become aware that a lot of people just don't know. They may not know the education behind who do we incarcerate in Wisconsin, the education behind what are your rights and knowing what your rights are. And taking a look, when we look at the history behind how we incarcerate, as we know, slavery evolved into mass incarceration. And what I mean by that is, for those who don't know, as far as the 13th Amendment goes, the 13th Amendment may have ended slavery, but there was a clause put in that is unless you were convicted of a crime. And how they were able to do that is, at that time, our economy still needed to move. And so when we talk about slavery incarceration, the men and women in those facilities run those facilities. They operate those facilities. They cook, they clean, they maintain the yard, they maintain not only the yard, but if anything happens in the facility, they take care of that. And they may only be getting 12 cents an hour. And that's where you look at some of these people that are doing hard work all day, maybe getting 12 or 11 cents an hour. Taking it further, we also have women that work for some of the companies and the institutions, and even some men that may pay them 75 cents, 50 cents an hour to do a lot of work that is a profit. And that's where we talk about that slavery piece. And how we ended up getting to where we're at today when we talk about furthering the mass incarceration in Wisconsin and with crimeless revocation is, many of us know and we're familiar with the war on drugs. And many people are still affected by what happened with the war on drugs in the 1980s and 1990s. Many people are still living that today, and many Black and brown men and women and their families died because of that. Their lives they're thrown away, families were ripped apart, many children were sent into foster care. And here we are now. And what we're seeing now is, of course, the opiate crisis. And when we have this opiate crisis and we take a look at crimeless revocation, and then you add in with probation, we have a lot of people that are returning to prison because of a rule violation. And that rule violation could be somebody maybe relapsed on drugs. And when somebody gets released, as you can see the statement above, probation and parole weren't ever designed to necessarily help people. And I think people fail and don't see that. That's a common question for me, is that why isn't the agent maybe helping? But that was not what they were initially designed to do. Probation and parole was designed to find out if somebody was going to continuously have criminal behavior. There wasn't that support system. Things have evolved to where some agents have been trained, but unfortunately that training is not across the board with all regions that we see in our state. We do have some amazing probation and parole agents that are trained in trauma-informed care. They may have a social work background, but that doesn't mean many of them evolved. And this is why we're having the conversation we're having today. So in talking about ending crimeless revocation in our state is, for those who may not know, crimeless revocation, again, is not committing a new crime, but violating one of your rules of supervision. And here in Wisconsin, most people may have a set of 18 standard rules, but several people can get additional rules added on top of them. And Lance is going to go ahead, not right now, but further, he'll explain his story on what this is. But the significance of what this does to a person and a family, just to give you another brief example, is if somebody relapses, and relapse, as we know, is to be expected in recovery, they may not get an ATR, which is an alternative to revocation. They may not have an agent who gives them an ATR alternative and has them go into a treatment program. Some agents may go ahead and start a revocation process, and they don't go back in any type of initial judge who had sentenced them in that case. For those who don't know, there's no due process in that, and that person, let's say they may have relapsed, and there was no proof of that, or somebody had said that they did, just based on allegations alone and hearsay. An administrative law judge is ultimately the person that sees and reviews that. As you can see here, and even to break some of the rules down just even a little bit further, typical rules of supervision. Some of the most common ones that we have is you cannot move your residence without approval. You cannot leave your employment, change jobs without approval. You are not allowed to obtain credit in any way without approval. And so when we even talk about the issue of credit, those of us know that credit is a staple in our lives. And being able to build credit in many different ways is important because it gives you financial independence and being able to have that. And that's what many of our people even just struggle with when they come home is being able to get a job, but being able to have enough money to take care of themselves and their family is a big struggle. Even too, when we talk about, for some people who want to buy a house, you have to get approval to do that. You have to get approval to leave the state. And so in many cases, I mean, we have many people that do get revocated because they may not have said they changed a job. Maybe because of transportation, they weren't able to get to their appointment and they had to cancel it. This is a real thing that many people here deal with. And even taking it further, I'm going to have some graphs that are going to come up to explain a little bit more, but crimeless revocation ultimately is the driver to incarceration in our state of Wisconsin. If you can take a look at, out of 12,327 people are incarcerated as a result of supervision violations, again, not committing a crime, but committing a rule violation. And this costs our state $451 million. And even at a technical supervision rule, $197 million per year. And when you take a look at how much it costs somebody to be incarcerated, $34,000 a year. And again, many of these people can remain home with their families and in their communities. And again, several of these people may have had a job, had a great employer, had a stable place to live. Maybe they're a single mom or a single dad, and their life in this moment over a rule can get disrupted and they lose everything. Taking a look here, I want you to look at, this was in 2017, Wisconsin prison populations due to rule violations. As you can see, Wisconsin came in 4th on here at 52%. So this was 52% of people in that population were there for some type of rule violation. On this next one, I want you to take a look at here in 2017, Wisconsin state prison admissions for supervision violations. Here it clearly states we were the 3rd that came in. What stands out, 45% of all prison admissions in 2017 were for a rule violation only. So let's think about that for a second. 45%. That's a high number. And many people believe that the people that cycle our system or are incarcerated, it's that narrative of fear, the violent and the worst of the worst case scenario, and that's not the case. This is what we have driving it, and what's driving it, and we take a look at who are we incarcerating. We are incarcerating, again, social problems. We incarcerate people due to poverty. These are the root cause issues. And I can even highlight as well, not as it only the driver, but when we take a look at for women, out of the 3 prisons for women in the state of Wisconsin, they total about 1,304 as of July 3rd. Women tend to get violated due to relapse or accusations. But women as well, more than half of them are there due to a rule violation. And that's not okay. And a lot of women, again, go through the same process of they get out, they try to get their children, if they don't have them, a stable place to live. And if they didn't report that they changed jobs or were accused of having alcohol in their house, may have gotten a credit card and didn't get approval for it, they lose their kids again, they lose their house, and they lose their job. And when these people can just be and remain in their community. In a moment, you're going to hear Lance's story and his experience of not only being a business owner, but somebody who had 28 employees and how this affected him in business. And it's also too something that we want to highlight is we do have businesses that are afraid and hesitant to hire people that are on supervision, whether or not they know of this. But as a business owner, the significance behind this is if somebody may be a nurse and could be on supervision, and she has a rule. Somebody called in and gave allegations of that she was somewhere, something happened, and she gets locked up and let's say revocated. That's a shift that has to be covered, and it impacts many different people in many ways. Here are some of the strategies that we have in place of we end crimeless revocation. Well, what do we do with some of these people? What do I do if I have somebody that doesn't want to go to treatment or is using drugs? There's many different things in the community, and if we focus on as a community, and these are members of our community, how can we best support them? Because as we know, when people get released from incarceration, we don't have reentry. Unless you have community, and there are some organizations that do work for that, we don't have the reentry or the support. And so taking a look at this, instead, expand mental health treatment, expand the substance abuse treatment. And if there's anybody here from the substance treatment and mental health, I cannot encourage you all enough that we need you to work together. I can't tell you how many different times I've seen the mental health community and substance abuse, they don't want to work together. They don't want to see that many people who may struggle with substance abuse have the root cause is mental health, whether that be depression, PTSD, all of those things. But we need the community of the both of you to come together and work. Some other options are ensure prosecutorial reform and expanding the judicial discretion. So even talking into this a little bit further and in comparison to what we have for COVID, I do want to recognize that we had a high number of people that did get released from county jails when we were asking for the release of people due to COVID between the jails and the Department of Corrections. And there was a release of about 1,348 people who were on misdemeanor charges, but they were on supervision holds for rule violations. And that's something that we want to keep out. But at the same time, we want to continue in that this doesn't need to continue because we do have several people in prison that are there because of a rule violation. Also, when we talk about due to COVID, in addition to that, we did have a lot of jails decarcerate. In that Outagamie County, I want to say, was also a high one that worked the best to decarcerate with the COVID, whether that be electronic monitoring, reporting, or just giving people signature bonds. And so in addition to what we're doing, we want to keep that as those people don't even need to be incarcerated to begin with, right? And so before I have Lance go on and speak, we oftentimes have people talk about, well, these people need to stay inside, or, you know, we have this vision and this narrative that people who are incarcerated are there for the most violent and heinous things, and they're not, because I've seen it. If we also take into account 94% of people who are convicted in the state take a plea bargain. Take a plea bargain. And there's something to be said for that, because a lot of people can't afford an attorney. And if somebody who truly may be innocent wants to take his case to trial, but is told by his own attorney that if you take your case to trial, this could look worse for you and you could get a significant more time. And that's real. And so we do have a lot of people in our prison system that take plea bargains, who would have wished if they could have fought their case. Several who truly may be innocent. But when we talk about who's incarcerated, I want you to remember that number, that 94% take a plea bargain. And a lot of people do it out of fear. And it really makes the rest of us wonder how many Black and brown people are incarcerated in the state of Wisconsin that may truly be innocent. And 95% of these people come home. So with 95% of these people that come home, if what they went to a prison for is not even addressed, because it's a warehouse and it holds people, as we all know, they come out angry. And they come out, I've had fellow comrades of mine state, what makes you think I survived? I'm here, but what makes you think I survived this? The damage that's done to somebody mentally can be a lifetime. And again, with crimeless revocation, this is something that could literally just continuously be destroying people's lives, and it doesn't need to happen, especially when these are things that can be taken care of in our own community. And so, as you can see here, before I turn it over to Lance, because I'm also going to have Lance kind of briefly introduce himself. His story is very powerful. I've been working with him for a while, and I appreciate all the things that he does, not only with this, but with our community. But I want you to take in what he has to share, because it's very moving. And if this has happened to him, this has happened to many other people, and we can imagine how this has really even turned out for a lot of Black and brown people. So Lance, if you want to go ahead and briefly introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
And you can get started. We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, my name's Lance Lay. I live in Appleton. I was born and raised in Racine most of my life. And I'm impacted by crimeless revocation. I guess, should I go ahead and just lay the story out there and let them know what happened, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
Okay. 2005, I was convicted of a drug conviction and given 5 years prison time, 9 years extended supervision. I was released in 2010. March 21st of 2010, I was released from RCI to start my 9 years extended supervision. That 9 years, I had 3 years consecutive to 3 years consecutive to 3 years, which made the 9. In July of 2018, I had about a little over 8, almost 8.5 years in. I had an employee of mine at the time call my probation officer, basically telling all types of lies, saying I was doing drugs and I had weapons in my house and leaving state without travel permits. And this was all because he was upset because he got fired and wanted his paycheck right away, and I was going to make him wait till payday. So I was taken into custody. Upon me being taken into custody, my agent had told me all this, so I thought it was crazy. I handed her over my keys and I said, go search my house. I don't have anything of the sorts there. This is insane. needless to say, they came out of my house with some alcohol. Now, it is
And
one
that
of
was
the
an employee, right, Lance? That
What's
was your
that?
employee. That was your employee.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yes. Oh, a former employee at the time. He was
Yep.
no longer an employee. He was terminated. So yeah, needless to say, they came out of my house with alcohol. Now, yeah, it was a standard rule. I had alcohol in my house. I screwed up. But I was incarcerated in the Winnebago County Jail. Initially, about a week and a half after being there, my agent had called my fiance at the time and said, okay, we're working on a 90-day sanction with work release Huber. We just got to get it signed off on and this and that. And 2 weeks later, they come to me with revocation papers, basically saying they were revoking me. Even though I only had about 8 months left on paper, I had been on well over 8.5 years. Never been in trouble one time, never dropped dirty, never nothing, you know. And so I fought my revocation. I even, as part of it, they were saying they were pursuing revocation because I needed treatment in the confined setting. Now, keep in mind, they never accused me of even drinking the alcohol, just simply possessing
Right.
it. So they were saying I needed treatment for having alcohol in my house, and I didn't even have an alcohol-related crime. I never have. I've never really had a drinking problem. I just like to entertain people when they come over to my house from time to time. And I fought the revocation. Part of it that I presented at my revocation hearing was ATR, which is an alternative to revocation, as you said, because they had shut down the sanction. I believe it's a 90-day program at Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, which is treatment in a confined setting. I had also lined up private treatment, which I could have paid for on my own without the state's assistance, and they shut all of it down and said, no, I needed to go to prison for treatment in a confined setting. So at this point, by the time my revocation was final, I got the paperwork. They revoked me for a year. Now, I only had 8 months left, but I was going back to prison for a year now, followed by 2 more years of extended supervision, even though I was supposed to be done in 8 months. Now, at that time, I had about 6 months in on this year, which everybody knows. You go to Dodge, which is the intake prison. You're there for 3 months. So by the time I seen a correctional facility to actually do programming, I had about 2.5 months left, which everybody knows in this state, you got to have about 18 months to 2 years to even think about doing a program. So yeah, they sent me back to prison for having alcohol in my house. At the time of my incarceration, I had 28 employees, a very thriving business. Thank God I still have it all, and I've managed to somewhat rebuild it, even though it got pretty rough for a while. But here's the bigger kicker. I've been out about a year and a month now, and about 3 weeks ago, I got permission from the same probation officer. I just purchased a bar with her permission, even though she sent me
the same agent.
The same agent. Now, and I mean, I shouldn't necessarily say it was the agent, because I do have a piece of paper in my possession where my agent and her supervisor had both signed off on a 90-day sanction, which furthermore, it said work release Huber. So, but then it was treatment in confined setting, and that was set in by the regional chief. So my agent and her supervisor were fine with not revocating me. But yeah, now a year later, after being out, they gave me permission to buy a bar that sells alcohol. So I mean,
and there's something to be said for that, right? You know, I remember when you had shared with me, you know, how you also shared here 6 months in the county jail. And then you also shared something with me when you ended up at Dodge, because you were only there for 6 months, that you
Yeah,
weren't able even to do any type of programming, and or you couldn't go anywhere else. You just had to sit right at Dodge.
yeah, they wouldn't even let me go, even though when I had left prison in 2010, I left from a work release minimum. They wouldn't let me go to a work release minimum because I didn't have enough time. So I got put in a medium security facility, you know, basically surrounded by a bunch of people doing life, you know, that are never going home, and I'm going home in a couple months. I mean, there's no method to their madness. I mean, they push the issue of treatment in a confined setting, but they know good damn well that you're not going to get treatment with a year, let alone, I didn't even have a year by the time my revocation was final. I had about 5 months left going into Dodge. So, and then luckily, you know, that I filed for my 85%, and like literally it went through faster than anybody I've ever seen, because I was out a week later after I filed it. Usually it takes people about a month
To be able to get that.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, but I mean, it's just crazy. You know, I had 8 months left, and now, you know, 3 years started over.
The 3 years.
Yeah.
I remember when you also shared with me when we talk about like the 28 employees. Can you share with us what happened? There was something that happened with 2 of your employees.
I mean, there was quite a few of them. Two of them ended up homeless. They couldn't pay bills because they didn't have work, you know, because they had relied on me for the 6 years before that for work. Another one of my employees ended up in trouble with his probation officer because she was hassling him about working, and this, I mean, it just created such a domino effect, like all the way around. You know, I'm supporting this many people. You know, I got my family I'm supporting, you know, and how you mentioned earlier, the price it costs to incarcerate people per year.
Right.
I was generating 3 times that in tax revenue for the state of Wisconsin, being out here working. But they, instead of getting that tax revenue, they'd rather spend it to lock me up because I'm such a danger to society for having alcohol in my house. I mean, it created a major domino effect. Thank God I still have my home. I still have my business, even though it took a lot of rebuilding. But I had 2 brand new vehicles that I had to send back to the bank. You know, it wasn't tough on my wife at home, you know, getting through, you know, being a breadwinner, and her, you know, we base our bills around the joint income. You know, it just had a major domino effect.
Right. And to be sent back certainly for a year over something like that. And, you know, even our conversation, I think, and again, it's here. I like to go back to how you unfortunately had somebody that you had to fire, and that was retaliation. So what he initially accused you of to your agent was false. And then they went to your house and found something else and brought that.
Well, this was the crazy thing. Even with everything that was false, they still put that in your initial revocation report. As the allegations. And this is the thing, even with all those allegations of me having firearms and me doing drugs, my agent still found it. I mean, she knew it was total BS. She still found it okay to give me a 90-day sanction and sign off on it. You know, even with all of those allegations. So then once all those allegations were proven wrong, they still pursued it.
And even in your case too, it makes me wonder how many people, and if anybody has been impacted similar to Lance like this, where your agent is wanting to give you a sanction, but you have somebody that's above her, whether it be the regional chief, that is saying, no, we're going to revocate you. We certainly want to hear from you, so please reach out to us for that, because we also see that as an issue. Lance, I know that your fiance stuck by your side and was certainly supportive, but even in your situation, and in conversation with many other people, there's always that fear. When you're on supervision, probation, there's always that fear, like something might happen. At any given moment, somebody could call and say something and get you sent back.
Well, there's the fear period. Like, I remember calling you like 2 weeks after I was out. You know, when I got locked up, it caused a lot of problems with my business, and there was a sheriff that came parked outside the house, and he was coming to knock on the door, and I had called you, like, I'm freaking out. And, you know, because I was locked up, he was serving me some papers from, you know, something to do with my business, basically serving me court papers, but I was freaking out, like, oh God, I'm going back to jail. What for now?
Yeah. And one of the most common things that we also hear, we have people contact us. I mean, I've even experienced something similar. When somebody's mad at you, and this can be even in a personal relationship, whether it be a girlfriend, your husband, wife, if that person gets mad at you, that tends to be something they like to go. You know, I'm going to call your agent and say that you did this to me, or you threatened me. And we have some agents that pay attention to that and know that it exists, but for some, it doesn't always happen. And so there's just a lot of fear behind people, where people will call your agent if they're upset with you and say false allegations. Why? Because allegations can get you revocated. They don't need to be factual. Again, you have no due process. And something I like just to tell people in general, like when you're on supervision, be very careful. For those who can, you know, build a relationship up with your agent, but that's another thing, that it's those allegations alone without anything factual, based on we believe that happened, or we think based on your past behavior that you're still behaving like that. None of that's okay, because it's destroying lives.
Like my situation was kind of like that too, because initially, even though everybody knows who really called my agent, it was in the paperwork that it was a girl named April that called, and she was the baby mama of this person. And then when we went through with the revocation, they called the number back to get her to come testify, and some other girl answered the phone stating that I don't know an April. I think that was this girl that just walked up to me and asked to use my phone one day. And they still pursued it based off that. You know, it's crazy. I mean, I just look at it, the people that aren't as fortunate as me, people working 9 to 5, might work at McDonald's, barely making ends meet.
Right.
And they get locked up, like, they lose everything. You know, kids end up homeless, families end up, I mean, it's just, it has such an effect, and they don't pay attention. I just don't know if they don't care. Or, like, my situation, I feel like my PO was basically told, you know, look, you have a job to do your job, do what we tell you to do. Because it was like, you know, it always seemed like she was real cool, you know, even with the allegations and the 90-day sanction. And I know she tried to give me a sanction, but then at the revocation hearing, it's like she was a totally different person, and I was such a savage, you know. And then even after I got out, you know, in a roundabout way, she kind of said, you know, I have a job to do. You know, so it's almost like they're the higher ups, or as I like to say, their computer system, because no different than when you go to Dodge, they use a computer to classify you. They don't really look at anything, you know. And I think it was a computer system that the regional chief decided, and I don't feel like it was really my agent, you know.
Right. I completely understand with that. And even too, I remember, and you briefly shared this, but like when you went into Dodge on your paperwork, it had that you had weapons when you never did.
Yeah.
And you went there because of alcohol. And I point that out, and I'll say that again, on his paperwork, it had that he was accused of having weapons. He could be considered somebody.
Everything that I was accused for when I went to do my staffing, they don't they get your original allegations, and it says that you did everything, no matter what you, and I even told her, I said, look, I got found not guilty of all that. You know, all that was found to not be true. She said, well, I don't have that paperwork. And I had the paperwork. She said, well, I'm not looking at that. I have mine, and I have what I have. And basically all they had was all the allegations, like it was all true.
Yeah, and just to remind people, again, none of this needs to necessarily, I think, be factual. It's just, I mean, yes, we've seen some people who were able to get the alcohol piece waived. That's not even part of their rule. We've had some people that it's just, you get a verbal warning. And there's several different things that agents can do outside of locking somebody up and going through with a revocation. So I want that to be known, whether that could be a sanction, whether that could be they have to sit overnight on a weekend so it doesn't disrupt their family or their job. There are many things that they can do and use outside of something like that happening. And I brought up the weapons piece because Lance could be seen as somebody that's considered violent because of that. And the violent issue that we have in our society, as we have so many violent people, that's an example of somebody who's really not violent being classified as violent. And none of that stuff is okay. We have a couple questions that are coming in. The first one that we have on here, and please, if anybody has any questions, wants to ask anything further or share an experience they had, you can definitely reach out to us. Myself or Sean will give you our emails. But we have a question here is, why does all of the time outside doing the right thing not count? And going back to what you had said, Lance, is a person can have 10 years and 5 years of ES, but because of legislative law, is that if you get in trouble off that 5 years of probation or ES, that time just doesn't count. And that's another reason to point out that this can be a forever system. And we've seen people who were on off 10 years of extended supervision have allegations called them in on their 9th year. And on that 9th year, they unfortunately had to change. They unfortunately had to change an agent, and that agent was very different with that particular person. And she was revocated off of her last year. And then as soon as she came out, she was gone a year. She has 5 more years to do. And again, if we look at, we have about 68,000 people on some form of supervision. Unfortunately, that's just the way the law is, and something that, you know, we also are working on to change in that. Lance, do you want to add to that at all? Because you were on your last as well. So, and now
I mean, it's such a broken system. I mean, and honestly, I mean, I'm probably wrong in saying this, but it seemed like when I was in the county jail, I seen so many people come in and out and get ATR and get sanctioned, and they were catching new cases. It almost seemed like it's a trap. Like, if they know that you're going to keep getting in trouble and they know you got a while to go still, they want to walk you out as long as they can and give you chance. But it seemed like everybody that was doing what they needed to do and only had a short time to go and had been on for a while, the smallest thing, it was like, aha, we got you. You know, I guess it's like, you know, they say the system, once you get in, it's the hardest thing to get out. I mean, it's true. I mean, in Wisconsin, it's true, because literally almost everybody that was getting revocated had been on for a while and was about to get off, and it was over allegations.
Right. Lance, I know you have experience and knowledge of what rules look like in other states. Could you describe, we have 18 plus here. What do you know about some other states?
I mean, I'll just tell you about a personal experience. In 2010, when I got released, I did an interstate compact to Georgia. Never been there before in my life. I got released from RCI at like 7 in the morning. I was on a plane at 10 o'clock to head to Georgia. Next day, I see my new agent in Georgia.
Okay.
And I walk in the office. I hand them the papers that prison told me to hand them. And, you know, pardon my French, but the one PO goes, "Hey, Ross, come here, get a load of this shit." And he hands them over my rules. And all the agents in the office start laughing. And they're going through the rules, reading, going, "Must have asked, borrow money." And they're laughing at every single rule. And they tore them up. And I'm like, I was kind of freaking out because I'm still institutionalized. I'm like, what's going on here? And they start laughing, and they point to a little sign on the wall. They said, "Look, you're in Georgia now. There's only 3 rules here. No firearms, no drugs, no felonies. We're not going to do any of this other petty stuff. We don't care if you drink. You're not on for a drinking crime.
Mm-hmm.
You don't got to ask us to borrow anything. You know, if you want to leave state, just give us a call." Like literally, because where I lived in Georgia was about 10 minutes from the Florida line. And they were like, "Look, if you want to go into Florida for the day, just give us a call and say, 'Hey, I'm going out of town.'"
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's crazy.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out, because many people that I talk to don't realize that. I think some people see what we have for Wisconsin and that just automatically must apply to other states. So just keeping yourself educated is just super important. That's another reason why we're here, is to keep people educated on the very things that we're fighting to change. Another question that has come in is, how do we prevent something like this from happening to someone else? And I just want to add in with that, for people that do, and like you kind of shared with me, you were seeing people come in and out because of drug use. As we know that we already incarcerate people for social issues, you know, incarcerating somebody because they relapsed is still not the answer to do that. And part of that comes in is, first of all, was that person ever given an individual program to assess what's going on? And we see a lot of people in our community that either can't afford to, or there isn't just that service to help put pieces like that together to see is the mental health component and so forth. But to even, I think, ask you, and I'll just add this question over to you. What are your thoughts on how we prevent something like this from happening to someone? Like what happened to you, for example?
Take the power out of the PO's hands. I mean, it's a hard question to answer because, like you had mentioned earlier, some people can't afford lawyers and this and that. I had one of the best lawyers money can buy. I had very well politically known business people testify at my revocation hearing. I mean, I don't know, because I didn't expect it myself. I mean, a lot of people, even half the people that worked at the Winnebago County Jail, couldn't believe I was getting revocated. I mean, laws got to get changed. That's the only way you can prevent it from happening again. I mean, to be totally honest.
Right. Absolutely. And I think Lance was part of a tour with us that we did last year on this very topic. We toured the state of Wisconsin and did a presentation on crimeless revocation and met many different individuals throughout our state who were impacted. Many family members, whether that be somebody from relapse, whether that be, we had a person that was revocated because they moved from the upstairs apartment to downstairs. And again, I think to answer all of this is, obviously our legislators are not in session until next year, but it's important for us to keep this education going, having more conversations. We want to know more people who have really been impacted by this, maybe something similar to Lance, but we also know for businesses who employ people who may be on supervision, we don't want them to not hire somebody because of that. At the same time, we just need to take into consideration. I mean, this can affect so many different people in many ways. And ultimately, we just keep these people in our community. We don't need to be sending them back for something like this, especially if they are not committing a new crime at all. Just keeping these people, especially if they have kids, with their families in our communities. And it's also, I would say, a community responsibility. It's our responsibility to take care of our community members. What do our community members need? What do we have to advocate for? Who do we need to have conversations with? And a lot of that just starts there as well. In that, and I don't think that we have any more from there. Lance, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before?
No.
Okay.
Good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. Before I go ahead and close, again, if there's anyone that wants to be able to get more involved what we're doing with the Smart Justice campaign, obviously crimeless revocation is a legislative policy that needs to be changed. And that's our focus on having that done. Certainly feel free to either get in touch with myself or Sean Wilson, who is the statewide organizer for our Smart Justice campaign. We can certainly leave our emails in the chat and messaging. And also too, just call to action wise, what things people can also start doing going forward. We recently had a report card that came out and we were given a F+. We are still also pushing to decarcerate and pushing our governor to let a lot of our people who are in prison out, whether that be, and he has already the solutions, whether there's somebody that's 65 and older or somebody who has a year or 6 months. He really needs to let these people out because of the COVID. And again, I mean, that's a moral issue. Not a conversation like we were just having. It's just that's a moral thing that our governor needs to act quickly. And that's something that I want to give a shout out to Wisdom and Expo, who also have been working on all of these things that I've talked about today, ending crimeless revocation and decarcerating during this COVID pandemic. So I thank them all for all of their help and all of the work that they do as well. Another thing is last week, Raisha, one of my fantastic colleagues, and Molly and several other people gave a town hall on the jail voting report that came out. Please share that with your county jails. We want more of the county jails in here they need to start a process so people can vote in those county jails. I'm happy to say that Outagamie County has taken steps with that. So we encourage you. Those links, I believe, are being put in the chat, but that for those who aren't familiar with the jail voting report, please read it, check it out, start having conversations on how people that can vote in the jail, that a process be started so that can happen.
I had a question that came up. Somebody had asked if the regional chief was new to the position and he was trying to make an example of me. Honestly, I don't know.
That's a good question.
I'm not sure if he was new at the time, but I know he was. There was another guy there that was another business owner like myself, and it was pretty much almost the same situation. He was out walking. He fit the description of somebody. They later found out he wasn't the somebody they were looking for, but when they ran his name, he was on paper and had alcohol on his breath, and he was on papers for 6 years and only had 2 months left to go, and they revoked him. So I'm not sure if the regional chief was new or not, but he was making an example out of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And that could very well be. I think, unfortunately, for those who may not know, there isn't I mean, we have agents that do different things per what region they are in per chief. And so that's kind of where we're at with that. Not one agent may handle an individual the way that another agent does. And that's kind of frustrating. We also do see privilege in that. But again, this is why we have these conversations and share these stories, because a lot of people don't know. They're not aware. And so we want to keep sharing these because we want to make these changes and get this policy changed and end crimeless revocation for good. So with that, and thank you for sharing that, Lance. So it's getting time. It's about 7:27. I want to thank all of the people who have tuned in. I miss my colleague Sean right now, but he's on vacation, and I hope he's having a good time with his family. So I want to give him a shout out. I'm thankful for the team I work with this in Wisconsin on Smart Justice, and just thank you to all our volunteers and leaders who are trying to work with this. We appreciate all of you and all of the things that you do. And so, like we said, this is something that we're looking to change come next year when legislators are back in session. We're going to continue to educate. We have a lot of things up and coming. So please stay tuned. And we also have some trainings that we're looking at doing, getting some people ready, how to engage their candidates and so forth. So again, thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Lance, for tuning in and being a panelist, and thank you, Molly, for assisting with all the other stuff. So everyone have a good night. It's hot outside, so stay cool. So
thank you.